Hello and welcome, everyone. Good morning, and I'm so pleased that so many of you are joining us today. My name is Rita Koutsoudiamos, and I'm the Executive Director of the BC Alliance for Healthy Living, and I'll be your moderator for the workshop today. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that I am joining you from the traditional unceded territories of the Squamish and Sechelt, where I have the privilege to live. And this virtual workshop is being broadcast from the traditional unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I think it's important to provide that acknowledgement as a way of recognizing that we are living on land that was taken by colonial forests, and those forces still contribute to institutionalized racism to this day. And but as an organization, we are committed to health equity and justice for our Indigenous friends, neighbors, and First Nations. So the purpose of our workshop today is to share and exchange knowledge about what works to promote and support active transportation in smaller communities. Before we get going, I would like to recognize and appreciate our funding partners that made this project possible, including the Real Estate Foundation, Pacific Blue Cross, CN Stronger Communities Fund, and the Heart and Stroke Foundation. We'd also like to thank our project advisory committee members and all of the local government leaders who responded to our survey, and an extra special thanks to our friends in Babine Lake Nation, Burns Lake, Duncan, Gibsons, Nelson, Powell River, and Rossland. Those communities welcomed us in and shared their stories with us, and we're just delighted to have many of them on the call today. So we have a great program with some fantastic presenters, but before we get going, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. I'm sure most of you are absolute Zoom pros by now, but just a reminder that we are going to have some questions, and so we'll ask people to unmute, but just try and remember to remute yourself. We'd invite you to add your organization to your profile. So if you're attending not as an individual, but as a member of an organization, just go ahead and add that to your profile so we can have a sense of who's all in the room. And we would also invite you to introduce yourself in the chat and where you're from. Later on so how this will work is we'll have some presentations, and after each section, we'll have an opportunity for questions. We really encourage you to ask questions, and how that'll work is we'd ask that you use the hand function, and then we'll invite you to unmute to ask your question, or alternatively, you can also plug your question into the chat session. And then later on, we're going to be doing breakout rooms and breaking you up into discussion groups. And there'll be a facilitator in each room who's going to guide you through that discussion. And we would really encourage you to participate and share your ideas on this topic. This is intended as an exchange, and because we know that there's so much expertise amongst the participants who are all joining us today, and just make sure that you step forward to share, and also step back and provide space for others to share. And I'll just add a little note that I know some of you may have attended our webinar earlier in November. You may notice a tiny bit of repetition at the start of the session as we go over some of the research findings, but please stay with us because we're featuring different communities that we did in the webinar, and we have just some wonderful presentations from community leaders and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. So here we are. The program is called Small Towns, Big Steps in Active Transportation. And BC Alliance for Healthy Living has long been a champion and advocate for active transportation because the relationship between land use and health is strong. From a health perspective, built environments have a significant influence on whether people are physically active, have social connections, and can access healthy foods or services that enhance health and wellness. So over the past year, BCAHL set out to investigate the success factors that work to promote and support active transportation in smaller communities, because up until now, so much of the research and guidance has really been done and focused in large cities. So BCAHL conducted surveys and interviews with BC communities with less than 30,000 residents. We used that on the ground knowledge to develop some case studies, and our key findings were informed by that process as well as a literature review. So for our workshop program today, we've got Carrie Mckelvey, our lead researcher, will start us off by providing an overview of the research and key findings. After that, we'll hear from Stacy Lightbourne about what they've done in Rossland to create a vibrant, walkable town center, despite the highway going through the center of town, and what they've done to add some linkages through the community that make this one of the most active towns in British Columbia. Then we'll hear from Bernard Patrick with Lake Babine Nation and Dale Ross with the village of Burns Lake about a great collaboration on a shared project to improve the walking conditions for everyone in the area. And after that, we're going to break out into those smaller groups to give everyone a chance to share what they know about supporting active transportation in smaller communities. And then finally, to wrap it all up, we'll hear from Jesse Skomolski and Kate Bernias from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure about BC's active transportation strategy and how the ministry is and can support active transportation in communities big and small across British Columbia. So there will be a chance for questions after each set of presentations, and if we don't get through all the questions, we'll try and answer the rest in a follow-up email. So let's get going here. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Carrie Mckelvey, who was our lead on this project. Carrie is the principal for Stride Consulting, but she's worked with BCAHL on multiple projects over the years, including as the evaluation lead on the Phase 1 initiatives for the BC Physical Activity Strategy. Kerry has a PhD in human kinetics from UBC and has been working in health research and evaluation for over 25 years. We're so glad to have her on our team and here with us today to share with you. Over to you now, Kerry.
Well, thank you, Rita. So I'm really happy to give you all some highlights from our research project. So we started off our research with a literature review to gather promising practices and help us understand the context before reaching out to small towns in BC. When we first waded into the literature, we saw straight away that small towns have some key advantages that set them up well for active transportation. There's good places to walk and ride bikes. There's parks and green spaces and trails to support active transportation, compact centers suited to active transportation trips, and a history of collaboration and partnering to get things done. But at the same time, there's a host of challenges common to small towns. Car-oriented roads, a lack of infrastructure for active transportation options, constrained terrain, constraints due to mountains and lakes and the way a town was originally built, safety challenges, highway as main street. This is a pretty consistent challenge across small towns with a provincial highway going right through downtown. Climate, lots of snow and ice and maintenance issues and the cost of that maintenance. And bridges. So these are often key in the active transportation network, but fraught with challenges to safety, constraints, and perceived ease of active transportation. So to understand what was really happening in BC small towns, we reached out with an online survey to 86 small towns with populations between 1,000 and 30,000 people. We had nearly 60 respondents, an enthusiastic response rate, which we were really happy with. Our respondents are all represented in the biker on your screen. We heard from Cranbrook, Valemont, Invermere, Lillooet, Oliver, Logan Lake, Port McNeill, Dawson Creek, and so many others you can see there. Through analysis of the survey findings, we found out that half the small towns had leadership or a champion in town to lead active transportation. However, fewer had dedicated staff for active transportation at just about a quarter of small towns. In the middle panel, you see nearly 2/3 of the towns had supportive policies for active transportation, but less than a third had adequate funding to support active transportation projects. And on the right side, you can see that 2/3 had active transportation represented in their official community plan, but not so many had a standalone active transportation plan at just 43%. We asked about infrastructure that was already in place in small towns to support active transportation, and it was most common for small towns to have crosswalks in busy areas and sidewalks in place. Over half had continuous and connected pathways, places to sit, and connection to other communities. Fewer had some basic and inexpensive infrastructure like bike racks and signage, lighting, and aesthetically pleasing features like art or landscaping. And BC small towns indicated there were several challenges for active transportation progress. A key one indicated by 72% of small towns is lack of funding. More than half also struggled with inadequate staff capacity and competing community priorities. Between 30 to 50% reported challenges ranging from lack of data, auto-dependent culture, challenging weather and topography, and conflicting goals. So then we started putting the pieces together. We identified a shorter list of communities that had completed the survey, scored well on indicators like walking or biking to work, ICBC cyclists, and pedestrian crash rates, and had some grant-funded active transportation projects in the last few years. We prioritized communities that had leadership or a champion in town. And we also considered community size and region in selecting small towns, aiming to showcase a diverse group of small towns with different active transportation challenges and approaches. Then we reached out to several communities to see if they would participate in our case study process. In the end, we virtually visited with Burns Lake and Rossland, and we had in-person visits with Powell River, Nelson, Gibsons, and Duncan. We did interviews and toured the towns to document their challenges and progress. We wanted to construct visual stories to complement our written case studies, so we collected video footage and took lots of photos. Before diving into the lessons that the small towns had to teach us, let's have a look at the common challenges in these leader towns. Even though these 6 towns had made greater progress than many other towns, they still felt the burden of obstacles. So in this table, it shows how the leader towns fared on the challenges we asked about on the survey. So this is a collection of challenges indicated by at least 4 of the 6 leader towns. Of note, inadequate funding was a problem for 5 of 6. And the other 4 challenges were trouble for at least 4 of the leader towns, conflicting goals between the municipality and Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, lack of data, and challenging topography. Though the leader towns faced challenges, they made progress anyway. We collected 11 key lessons through our analysis of interviews and time spent with municipal staff in the 6 small towns. So lesson number 1, Collaboration is the foundation of progress. We learned that collaboration is sometimes easier in small towns where people are accustomed to working together and pooling resources to get things done. This is true for Burns Lake, who worked in partnership with nearby Lake Babine Nation on the recent sidewalk project. Without a planner on staff, the village is accustomed to finding leadership and champions wherever they can, like within the Senior Society, mountain bike groups and schools, as well as working interdepartmentally. We saw that collaboration in small towns helps to overcome capacity gaps and get things done. We heard of the value of looking to other projects and strategies to see where energy and know-how can be leveraged for active transportation. Second, case study communities advised being ready for grants. This meant having strategies and plans in place to act fast and on funding opportunities. External funding for active transportation is so important to small towns, with most small municipalities unable to fund active transportation projects out of their operating budgets. Powell River acknowledged the challenge with being ready for grants. Small towns also need grants to develop the shovel-ready projects called for in RFPs, in addition to the funds to implement the project. Here we see Burns Lake's sidewalk project in progress. They were proposal ready and construction ready when they applied for the grant and needed to make progress during the short good weather window. Number 3, using trails and right-of-ways as connectors to build a network is common in small towns. Traveling on trails is enjoyable, and it's sometimes quicker to get from A to B on the trails. We heard about this in Burns Lake, Gibsons, Powell River, and Rossland, where the availability of green space and flexibility in right-of-ways is a strength. Incorporating natural spaces in the active transportation network offers the chance for residents to spend time in nature and accrue mental health benefits in that space. This concept of safe, healthy outdoor space was noted as particularly important during the COVID-19 pandemic. So many small towns are looking for connections to neighboring small towns. So the active transportation network can include other small towns in the area, and some case study communities, Rossland, Duncan, and Gibsons, for example, are working with other municipalities and regional districts to increase the opportunities and safety of active travel between towns. The example here shows the short distance between Rossland, Warfield, and Trail, less than 9 kilometers or 25 minutes biking to Trail with Warfield in the middle. The challenges are highway riding and a steep elevation loss of about 1,000 meters leaving Rossland. So e-bikes are definitely part of the conversation here. Number 5, creating accessible opportunities for active transportation is an important part of the approach in all case study communities. In Duncan, we heard how they coordinate with Cowichan tribes and are factoring in people who live with lower income and those who don't have access to a car in their active transportation planning. Here's a photo of the new sidewalk on Jubilee Street in Duncan, right outside a new Habitat for Humanity development. The turf is protecting space for the eventual bike path, which will offer accessible active transportation connections to people living in the new development. We heard about how developing plans for the primary bike route in Nelson involved navigating the route alongside people with mobility and vision challenges to understand strengths and weaknesses from their perspectives. And in Powell River, you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, the new Zynga bus offers accessible on-demand transit service that is improving how seniors and those with low income are getting around and connecting in the community. Looking forward, these examples suggest a shift towards merging accessibility and active transportation plans in small towns, or at least deeper examination of how one supports the other. Number 6, most case study communities acknowledge their town's active outdoorsy culture as a foundational factor in active transportation progress. Active transportation was a priority for town council, up there with affordable housing and sustainability. In Nelson, staff report back to council on active transportation project progress each year and invite ideas and collaboration on new projects going forward. They see this as an important piece for staying on track with the active transportation plan and for keeping council engaged. In Powell River, Nelson and Rossland, integrating active transportation with sustainability and climate change action helps to keep council's attention. And community education is important to creating a positive atmosphere around active transportation. In Gibsons, the town works on explaining new active transportation infrastructure to residents so that the changes are less surprising. Good examples are the advisory bike lane, pictured here on the right, and green paint that signifies a dedicated bike lane. The city of Nelson highlights to the public benefits of sidewalk bump outs or Sharrow signs, for example, and sees this as a good way to keep the community engaged in active transportation. In Powell River, staff saw the importance of extensive community engagement and education after a bike lane had to be removed due to community controversy and misunderstanding. Learning from this, they now prioritize engagement sessions to move active transportation projects forward in a positive way. And number 7, placemaking. There's great examples of placemaking in most of the case study towns that have a walkable downtown core. For example, the totem tour in Duncan helps pedestrians find the totem poles while walking through the downtown streets, and the Station Square Common provides a destination for outdoor meetings or a rest in the heart of downtown. Rossland uses art to improve the aesthetics of active transportation, and Spirit Square is a great destination in Burns Lake, close to downtown. And here you see on this slide, Burns Lake Spirit Square on the bottom right, and Rossland up on the top right, and the Station Street Common in Duncan on the left. So we heard about problems related to the provincial highway going through the heart of town in each of the case study communities. Traffic speed and volume are key concerns. The highway issue is front and center within active transportation planning in small towns, and there's a need to work with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure in a continuous way. More emphasis on active transportation solutions on highways will have a big impact on making these spaces safe. And here we see on the left, Burns Lake, Highway 35 and Highway 16, the Yellowhead Junction. And on the right, Rossland, we've got Highway 22 is Columbia Street through downtown. So looking at opportunities to integrate active transportation improvements with upgrading and capital plans. Makes great sense in small towns to be ready to insert active transportation improvements into planned upgrades to other infrastructure. If water and sewer lines are being replaced and the road needs to be dug up, then maybe it makes sense to also pave a bike lane when the road is replaced and repaved. Collaboration between engineering, operations, and planning can help make these endeavors more efficient. And number 10, build the network and don't let the perfect get in the way of the possible. Case study communities highlighted the need to create good connections to and between popular destinations like commercial areas, recreation centers, parks, and schools. They know that people traveling on foot, by wheelchair, or bike need safe and comfortable routes. In some places, these are mapped out in formal transportation plans, but in other places, it's just well understood where the priority routes are and what needs to be done next. We heard many times how important it is to prioritize progress over perfection. Starting somewhere was a key theme. Staff in many towns thought it was more important to start than to wait for the perfect solution. Given the challenges, perfect solutions for active transportation in small towns will be hard to come by. Staff also highlighted the need to right-size active transportation infrastructure to the small town context. Best practice in urban centers may not translate to small towns where traffic volumes are lower. Gibsons and Nelson gave examples of how their towns are testing options like road closures, knowing that adjustments can be made in the future if needed. Gibsons also highlighted how they are now starting to connect many parts of their active transportation network, acknowledging that it is disconnected, but if they hadn't started a while ago with the pieces, they'd have nothing to connect now. So here's a shot on the left side of the slide of the big orange bridge in Nelson. A big active transportation challenge. It's constrained and very busy with vehicle traffic. The Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure collaborated with the city on a partial solution, a light system, and you can see the yellow sign up above the bridge, a light system that's activated by cyclists to alert motorists that they are on the bridge. The city knows the solution is not perfect. It won't work for the many people who are very nervous about cycling in traffic on the bridge, but waiting for the time and budget to install a dedicated bike lane didn't make sense. It's a good start, and the bridge is safer than it was before. And number 11, this is our last lesson. We heard in most small towns that e-bikes are changing the active transportation conversation in a good way. Given the difficult terrain with steep grades in many BC small towns, e-bikes may help make active transportation possible in places where it previously seemed impossible. And connections between small towns may be facilitated by e-bikes. Another bonus is that e-bikes are making active transportation accessible for seniors. Research in Powell River showed that seniors on e-bikes are a primary active transportation user group in that town. At the very least, leaders in small towns suggested that e-bikes are here. They're changing active transportation in a big way and need to be factored into plans and projects going forward. And you see on the left of the slide, the sustainability planner in Powell River, riding her e-bike to work every day. We see a family in Rossland in the middle, navigating on an e-bike through the winter snow. And again, in Powell River, one of the older folks on the Seawalk on his e-bike. So we found that in the face of persistent, tough challenges, small towns in BC have made great strides in active transportation. Leader towns have an established culture of learning and collaboration, are interested in exploring and testing options and approaches that reach all users in an equitable way, and spend time educating and engaging the public. Council support is a distinct advantage in these towns, but it's also reinforced through staff efforts to merge active transportation and sustainability concepts and to keep active transportation plans on the agenda for council. Champions are key in active transportation projects, and in small towns, champions come from many places. We heard many times about the importance of progress over perfection, not waiting for perfect solutions that may never come, but acting to start putting the active transportation pieces together. Thanks very much. Back to you, Rita.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Carrie. That was great. Now I'd like to open it up. If anyone has questions for Carrie, just go ahead and use the hand function and we'll call on you to unmute and to ask your question. So I'm just scrolling down here, or of course you can also use the chat function as well. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So maybe I'll just go and ask about, maybe you can provide a little bit more of an example about the transit integration with the Zunga bus, because I think that's kind of a clever example that we haven't really seen in many communities.
Oh, sure. That was really fun to see that in Powell River, and Rita and I rode the Zunga bus, which was a highlight. It's a pilot project in Powell River, and they're able to, they're testing the option of an on-demand service. So they have this very cool large van looking bus that in Anna, the sustainability planners, where it says look like a party bus, and so people aren't really sure if they can get on if they're part of the party, but she reassures everyone that the bus is for everyone, and because it is a pilot right now, it is free. People are able to book rides from where they are, so it truly is an on-demand service, and the bus comes to them as long as they're in the pilot neighborhoods. And brings them where they need to go, and they're hearing some great stories about how this is really helping seniors especially get out and about in the community. They're able to meet with friends and get to services much more easily. And it's seeming much more of an efficient transit service for small towns that just don't have the huge demand to require a large bus on a permanent route.
Great. I see Jason Walsh has a question.
Yes, thanks. Kerry, I guess I work in one of the smaller municipality cities in the province of New Brunswick, and we recently just completed an active transportation plan due to some push, or I guess people in the community driving for it, and then also recognizing that there is a need for those connections throughout our municipality. I guess one question that I do have, and maybe more of a comment and see if there's some suggestions, is so those community groups that are really striving for active transportation and have a, let me say, perfect solution that they would like to see happen. How do you get them on board to building the network first with the municipality? With the understanding that there's limited resources, using the existing infrastructure, which what we currently do already have in place that can be altered and make sure we get those connections made rather than having to find the perfect solution. As a municipality, everyone always comes with these great grand ideas, and at the end of the day, it's okay, what's the most feasible way to make this happen, to make these connections happen? And how do you get the support, I guess, and that walk away from, okay, it's not perfect, but it's serving the purpose?
Oh, it's such a great question. And really, it was a focus, certainly, of our discussions in Nelson. I don't know if Sebastian is here, but he would be the perfect person, the planner in the city of Nelson, to ask this question, to answer this question for you. But I know that for their primary bike route, I see Sebastian there, and he's come off mute, which I love. Are you able to contribute to this, Sebastian? Oh, sorry, you're not quite off mute, I don't think. I can't hear you yet. Oh, try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. I guess the question is how to start this. Just knowing it sometimes it seems almost impossible. And if you know Nelson at all, you could say that it is next to impossible to create bike infrastructure or new active transportation infrastructure. I think you got to step away sometimes from having, the perfect solution and just start somewhere. And, sometimes for us, there was a lot of push to have like a bike lane, but that because we didn't have the right width, we would have had to move it to one-way traffic circulation, and it's going to create a lot of disruption. And so we kind of went through another planning process, and it was more so, let's do painting, let's do education, let's do signage. And knowing that in the future, we may change as we get more ridership or the cycling numbers increase, and then you get more public support for it. So I think that's kind of what the conversation Carrie and I had. Like, I think, you just got to start somewhere, and it's not going to be perfect. And but just don't let things stop you along the way because you can't get to that, and I'll use cycling as an example. You can't get that, designated bike lane. It's too complicated, too expensive. Well, just look at another alternative that would, push you in the right direction. Hope that helps.
Great. Thank you, Sebastian. That's wonderful that you're able to chime in here. I'm going to, we'll just, if you have other questions, just keep them in the chat. I noticed Tim, you've got one here about Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure and the highway, and I think we're going to get to that in our next presentation. And if not, then we've also got the Ministry of Transportation presentation at the end here. So let's carry on with our program and just continue to add your questions, and as I said, we'll do a follow-up email and try and answer as many of those as we can. So next up, I'm very happy to introduce Stacy Lightbourne. Now, she's prepared a presentation in advance as she had some surgery, but she has agreed to be here to answer questions anyway. So Stacy's worked with the City of Rossland for 17 years, starting as a planning assistant and eventually transitioning to the manager of planning, development, and sustainability. She enjoys the ongoing challenges of planning in a small, rural, resort-oriented community, and is really committed to personal health and community health and social and environmental health, and addressing the impacts of climate change through that work. And it's quite cute because she moved to Rossland in 1997 from New Zealand to spend a year or seasons skiing, and she's still there today. So let's turn it over to Stacy now.
I'm manager of planning, development, and sustainability for the City of Rossland. And I'm recording this ahead of time because I'm going to shoulder surgery just before this webinar, and I wasn't sure I'd be in any state to be able to present live, as I'm told I'm going to be in a lot of pain for the first week and on all kinds of painkillers. So I wanted to be somewhat coherent. So I'm recording this ahead of time. Hopefully I can be there to answer questions. So I was asked to do a presentation about active transportation in Rossland. So I've put together a little slideshow showing kind of the things that we've been doing. So Rossland is a small town in the West Kootenay region of British Columbia. We're high up in the mountains at about an elevation of 1,000 meters. We're definitely characterized by terrain that is most definitely not flat. In other words, to get anywhere, you need to go uphill or downhill. And that's a major part of our active transportation challenges. That and the fact that we're just a small rural town of 3,700 people. So not a lot of capacity, not a lot of money, and sometimes not a lot of interest or perceived need for active transportation. So it first started quite some time ago through a grant offered by the province. We developed an active transportation plan in 2008. And this is where we really opened up that idea and conversation in the community to talk about what active transportation might look like in Rossland. And so we were trying to move away from the kind of urban design thoughts, and not completely away, but that when people think of that, they think of, you know, bike lanes everywhere, separated bike lanes, and sidewalks, whereas we're a community of very little sidewalks and no bike lanes. And so just wanted to open up that conversation in the community. So, well, how can we improve active transportation? How can we think about ways to make it more enjoyable or easier to get from the places we go to the most? So the schools, our downtown, trailheads, the ski hill, other major destinations. So really what came out of that plan was that the main goals were to ensure that any major infrastructure replacement projects, because we do have aging infrastructure, just like a lot of other communities, that whenever we engage in a big major project, that we think about what improvements can we make to our active transportation infrastructure, so that it always is something that we are thinking about, not just the water and sewer lines and storm and replacing that, but can we put bike lanes, or should we put bike lanes, or sidewalks, or multi-purpose pathways, and just trying to improve that. As we dig up the street, we think about what we're going to put back in its place. Another major aspect was to use unused road right-of-ways for neighborhood connectors. And what that is that our community years ago, when it was first incorporated, was basically somebody decided to put a grid on top of a community that is most definitely not suited to a grid style layout of roads because of the steep grades. So because of that, we have some road right-of-way, so where a road perhaps maybe should have gone has not been able to be put in place because it's just too steep for a road. So we have large sections of those all through town, and so we use those and notice that they were being used anyway for neighborhood connectors between neighborhoods and downtown, or just between neighborhoods. So we asked in each area of town, which ones do people use, which ones could we use? And so that has been a big part of our active transportation plan, is just building trails in those right-of-ways to enable a more easier and fun connection. And the other major aspect of our active transportation plan is to use infrastructure right-of-ways, so where we have sewer and water lines, to also use those as trail connections. And a major one, which I'll show you further on the presentation, is from town to the ski hill, which is about 3 kilometers, not very far. The water and sewer lines that go to the ski hill also house the most important connector trail between the ski hill and Rossland. And then, of course, we have applied and received numerous grants for constructing all of these trails, and we've been quite successful, and really thank the province for making those grants available. So first, I'll start with some of examples of major infrastructure improvements. The first one is on Columbia Avenue, which is also Highway 3B. So it's actually maintained by the Ministry of Transportation, but it is also Rossland's downtown. So it was characterized previously as a very wide street. It did have some pedestrian crossworks, but it was a very wide and not very inviting. A lot of truck traffic going faster than we would like. The walks were relatively small, about 1 meter or so on each side of the road. And as you can see in these pictures, it's just a large expanse of road. And so MOT wanted to come and repave Main Street, and we asked them to put that off a year while we did the planning, not only to replace aging infrastructure underneath the road, but also that we could give some thought about what we were going to put back in its place. And thankfully, MOT was respectful of that request, and we went through a planning exercise with the community to determine the community priorities and identify potential design solutions. And it was a priority for the city to create a vibrant downtown core, which is pedestrian friendly, and to improve pedestrian safety as well. And in some ways that we had a lot of conversations with MOT on this, because obviously we have conflicting goals. That the MOT's priority is to get traffic moving as quickly and safely as possible, and we were not as focused on traffic. So that we had some interesting discussions on the different solutions. So the biggest one was the bump outs, or curb extensions is what the ministry calls it, and having wider sidewalks. So knowing that we had an area to work with, between buildings or property line to property line, and we had minimum or maximum widths we were allowed for lane widths, we worked on what we could put in between that space. And we managed to get a reduction in lane width for the downtown to basically the minimum they would allow, which is good. It makes the road seem smaller, traffic seems to go a lot slower. We also have curb extensions at every intersection, which also act to narrow the road somewhat. And they give space for sculptures and seating and more space for pedestrians. And it reduces the space to cross the highway. And they've been very successful. We have a number of statues on them, as you can see in the pictures below, or to the side here, Rusty, the horse, and Olus, he's the ski statue on the main street. Another solution was we were looking into different ways to address stormwater, and it wasn't really working that well. And we looked into rain gardens and other opportunities, but it really wouldn't work within the space that we had. But then we came across this example in the US, where instead of the stormwater running to the curb, which it used to previously, what we found when that happens, when the snow melts, and now often rain on snow events, we get a lot of pooling and puddling right at the curb. So when you get out of your vehicle and get to the sidewalk, you end up having to step in this huge puddle or try to jump over this huge puddle at the curb to try to get from your vehicle to the sidewalk. So we found these examples where the stormwater was actually drained behind the vehicles, and which has for one, it addresses the stormwater a lot better because it goes behind the vehicles and makes it easier to get from the vehicles to the curb. But also because of the concrete swale, it acts to visually reduce the size of the road. And so that acts to slow down the traffic. Initially in our discussions with MOT, this wasn't looked upon favorably, as it wasn't something that was normal or in their manual. So we had to have some discussions, and we had to prove to them how it had worked in other communities that we had noted. And the ones we were looking at were all in the States, and they're all big snowfall communities as well. So we were trying to highlight that this is something that works in a very snowy community where, we do get a lot of snow, but we also, it has to melt sometime. And often these days we tend to have a Pineapple Express go through a couple times a year where we do see some heavy rain on snow events. So this has been very effective, and yeah, we would highly recommend this approach. So these are some pictures afterwards. I wish we had some before pictures taken of the same locations, but we weren't really thinking that far ahead when we before the whole project started. But you can see we have wider sidewalks on both sides of the street. They're both the same on both sides. We have angled parking. We have the storm swales behind all the parking, which also act to visually reduce the lane widths. We have numerous curb extensions or bump outs with crosswalks. We have these beautiful maple trees, which are just a gorgeous color in the fall. And overall, a really pedestrian-friendly, vibrant downtown that gets a lot of good feedback from visitors and residents. Another major infrastructure improvement is along Washington Street, which is our major connector road that goes from our downtown and passes through a school zone where a skate park is and the Youth Action Network, our arena and school is, and then goes on towards our major trailhead and then on towards Red Mountain. So it is the main connector road. Before the project, it had limited sidewalks it did have sidewalks from downtown to the school. They were very small. But then from the school north to the trailheads and ski hill, there was no sidewalks. And it is quite steep and has 100-year-old water sewer pipes underneath it. And is an extremely wide road. It's just a massive expanse of asphalt. And so we were looking to replace the water and sewer pipes. So as part of that project, before we went into the design phase, we also thought about what kind of infrastructure, active transportation infrastructure we wanted to have on the street to improve what really was not working very well. So in this case, you can see in the before and after pictures, this is the lower section just coming into the downtown. You can see it's a wide road, parking on both sides, small sidewalks on this case. And we replaced it with narrower lane widths. We created more bump outs at all the intersections. We also created a separated bike lane from the downtown to the school. And after the school, the road wasn't wide enough to accommodate a bike lane. So we had a multi-purpose path. So it was just a wider sidewalk. And that it was different for Rossland. It was definitely something that took some getting used to for some people, as we had not had a bike lane at all in town. So we sold it also because it acts as great snow storage in the winter. I can see in the future, perhaps we may need to plow it with the advent of fat bikes, but for now we pile snow from the sidewalk onto it and from the road for a while, and then we do eventually clear out that snow, but it provides a good operational use as well. And it is well used, especially in this part where it is quite steep. And so it is a great separated bike lane. It was funded by the province through a grant application. And interestingly enough, for the upper section where we created the multi-purpose pathway, it actually, the grant at that time specifically asked for that sidewalks were not permitted as part of the grant application. So although essentially this is just a sidewalk, by calling it a multi-purpose pathway and making it wider than your general sidewalk, it was able to be funded by the province. This is a map showing the top of Washington Street. And you can see before, it's just a number of roads coming into a very awkward intersection here with no sidewalks. There is a pedestrian crossing that goes from a trail that we have across and up to another trailhead. But we replaced that with a multi-purpose pathway that comes on the north side of the street and made these intersections a lot more obvious and safer for all involved, pedestrians and bikes and cars. Another part of our active transportation plan is what we've called these neighborhood connectors. And this is where we're using city land or unused road right-of-ways to make trails that connect the neighborhoods. A lot of these are very steep, so we've put switchbacks in to reduce the grades. These were also grant funded, and at that time, these were early on in our implementation phase. At that time, the grants would not face trails, but we just sold them as that they're not necessarily recreation trails, that these really are acting as neighborhood connectors, making a more enjoyable, fun, and often quicker way to get between neighborhoods, and so would be well utilized. And they are well utilized in the community and much appreciated. So you can see on the map on the side, there's the red lines, there's some of these trails and where they go. So they're just utilizing old city land or road right-of-ways to make some connections that are off the road in a much more enjoyable place. The picture there shows if this was the Star Gulch Trail project, it was funded by a grant application. The other one is to use, like I said, infrastructure right-of-way. So water and sewer infrastructure to Red Mountain has a major trail connector on the top. So it is the major off-road link between the ski hill and Red Mountain, which is about 2 or 3 kilometers away from town. It's groomed in the winter for fat biking and cross-country skiing, groomed by the city. And we ensure that it's connected all the way to the ski hill by requiring developer to put a tunnel in where they built a new road in the past 5 years. So there's 2 tunnels actually, one that goes under the highway and one that goes under a new road that a developer built to a subdivision at the ski hill. So that ensures that it continues to be used and is safe for pedestrians and cyclists, and it's heavily utilized. We eventually want to extend this north towards the cross-country ski area, which is just north of Red Mountain, called Blackjack. There's some pictures along it. It's basically a very wide trail, gravel trail. It is actually fairly flat, and it is heavily utilized as one is both the connection to Red Mountain, but also as a connection to a lot of mountain bike trails and hiking trails around the city. So thanks for listening to this presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Hopefully I will be able to attend the event on Tuesday and be available to answer some questions about our program. I guess our next steps in our program is to look at our active transportation currently and see ways we can improve it, especially as we think of the new technologies of e-bikes, which have made what previously wasn't thought of as possible has now made it possible. So we're looking to connect Rossland down the hill to trail and Warfield and off-road connector link, which previously would not have been possible except for those extremely fit people. But now e-bikes are regularly doing that commute. And also that we have more and more fat bikes in the community. So looking at operational maintenance of all our connectors for the use of fat bikes. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you, Stacy. That's just a fantastic presentation, and so glad that you are joining us today. I know that you're feeling a little bit rough around the edges, so we are a little bit behind in our schedule. So I'll just start with one question here I see from Donna, who wants to ask, how on earth did you get MOTI to the table to even discuss bending their guidelines? Do you have an answer for that, Stacy?
Yeah, lots and lots and lots of pressure. Yeah, coffee and cookies, as Stephen says. Yeah, we're not getting far with the local representatives for MOTI. So we basically just went higher and higher on the totem pole, and we got everybody involved, not just staff. It seemed to come better from council and the mayor. And it was just a lot of pressure. And I'd say we were lucky, because I've had this conversation with other people and they said, we never got them to bend their rules, where we felt like it actually, once we got the right person at the table, that they were quite accommodating, because there was other conversations we had too around pedestrian crosswalks, and they wanted to have, I think, the normal pedestrian crosswalks that you would normally see on a highway with their big signage and lighting above the highway. And we didn't want that in our downtown because it isn't aesthetically pleasing. And so it wasn't our desire to have that. So that was another discussion and conversation that we had with them. And I think we were lots of persistence and keeping up the totem pole and keep bugging people, and hopefully finding the right person to talk to.
Oh, that's great. Lots of compliments here in the chat. People that have visited Rossland and who really appreciate the neighborhood connectors and trails and your main street. I'm just going to suggest, because we are running a little bit behind, that we save some of that for our discussion for our breakout groups. So thanks again, Stacy. Really glad you're well enough to join us today, and thanks so much for making the time, as well as for what an amazing job you've done for the city of Rossland. Thank you. Okay, so next up, I just want to bring in Bernard Patrick and Dale Ross. And I'll just tell you, as we were interviewing different communities for our study, we were really struck by the collaboration between Lake Babine Nation and the village of Burns Lake, because it really demonstrates some really good partnership practices. Not only is it a great example of working across a jurisdictional boundary, which, as we all know, is so important for developing networks, and transportation need to travel along networks, but it also really demonstrates a great example of a respectful relationship between a First Nation and a municipality. And we certainly need a lot more of that. So let me start by introducing Bernard Patrick, who is the Capital and Infrastructure Director for Lake Babine Nation. Lake Babine Nation is the third largest Aboriginal band in BC, with a total membership of over 2,500. On top of his infrastructure responsibilities, that includes includes not only transportation, but housing. He's also the Emergency Operations Director. So you can imagine how crazy his portfolio is, and so we are just so grateful to have Bernard with us today. And then we also have Dale Ross, who moved from the Lower Mainland to the village of Burns Lake, taking on the role of Director of Public Works in 2016. And since he arrived in Burns Lake, Dale has completed a number of infrastructure projects. A highlight over the past couple of years is working together with Lake Babine Nation and Burns Lake bands on the community's first ever water treatment plant, a newer sewer lift station, and a new sidewalk that safely connects Woyen Reserve to downtown Burns Lake. And I hope I'm saying that correctly, Woyen. Anyways, I'm going to turn it over to Bernard and Dale now.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, Rita.
So, what I was going to go into was basically Dale and I's relationship, working relationship. We kind of, previously Dale's predecessor, not to throw him under the bus, but I was new in this area and just trying to fit into my new role. And in working with Dale's predecessor, I found it a little bit challenging because he didn't seem too engaged in working with myself, and and luckily Dale came along, and he helped kind of the situation. The first time we met was we both, I asked him to assist me with a situation where a company was going through town and they were scamming certain individuals, certain businesses, and our health department was one of them. They were saying that they would pave their driveway for less amount of money because they had excess material, and I didn't know this was going on. The lady in our area okayed this, and this company took them for a loop. So they were trying to get the money out of them. So I stepped in and I said, no, it's not going to happen. So I called upon Dale, and I think this was Dale's first time around, and he came up, had a look, and we both kind of discussed this chart, and he was really helpful, and I knew that him and I would have a good working relationship. We didn't get our names right. I kept calling him Ross, and he kept calling me Patrick, and that went on for a little bit. But since then, we started working on numerous projects together, and any kind of situation develops in town, because we are neighbors, and whatever happens with us happens to them, and vice versa. And so we try and work together. I knew coming into this role that I needed to work hand in hand with the village of Burns Lake, and Dale made it so much easier to do that. And same with a lot of the folks in the village office there. So it's always good to have a good working relationship and good people like Dale to work with. So we have a working agreement with them as well, called the Municipal Type Service Agreement, which basically has the village working with us or for us for our services of water, sewer, garbage collection. So that's an agreement that has been ongoing for quite some time, but the village has always been doing above and beyond the MTSA agreement, which I really appreciate Dale and his crew for. And even with our own projects that are not working with the village, they assist us quite a bit in that. And so Dale approached me about the sidewalk project. This is after doing some projects together. He came up with to me about the sidewalk project, and I said immediately, yes, of course. So I had no issues with that, and I presented it to our chief and council and explained the reasoning behind it, and they were in favor of it. They had, like, our relationship is really good. I can't say enough about it. I don't know if Dale will want to add to that.
Thank you, Bernard, for those kind words, and Rita. And I'm just going to echo exactly what Bernard's been discussing over the last few minutes here. We've been working closely with Lake Babine Nation and actually Burns Lake Band on numerous projects, as Rita and Bernard both pointed out. We've always had a great working relationship, and whether it's Lake Babine Nations or Burns Lake Band or the Village of Burns Lake having ideas or improving or expanding our community, Bernard and myself would get together and discuss the details, bring them back to the elected officials for discussion and, just moving forward. As Bernard pointed out, we do have a full service agreement with Lake Babine Nation and Burns Lake Bands, which includes water and sewer, snow removal, and garbage, etc. And I do believe that having such an agreement in place has provided all the parties a chance to collaborate on numerous issues and ideas, and I believe it provides an opportunity to build on a relationship built out of trust, respect, and a desire to improve our community as a whole. As Bernard mentioned, you know, we all live within close proximity to each other. It's our community. We've always strive to improve on the infrastructure that we have in place. You know, for example, we did a splash park together a couple of years back. So, you know, again, it's our community, and whatever we can do to work together on improving that, you know, it's for the better. As Bernard pointed out, in 2020, Lake Babine and Village Burns Lake were successful in receiving a grant for phase 1 of a sidewalk project. And just to give you some background of Burns Lake, you know, we are also challenged with where we are in regards to, like, we're on a hill, we had open ditches, there's very few sidewalks in the residential area. So the phase 1 of the sidewalk connected Wyoming Reserve to the downtown core. But in between the Wyoming Reserve and the downtown core, we also connected the hospital, 3 senior care facilities, doctors and dentist office, schools, etc. So, you know, it was really important first step that we took last year to, you know, move forward with an active transportation plan. And this, as you're all aware, I'm sure, not only provides safe access to these facilities, but provides a means for active transportation and access for people that actually don't have access to vehicles. You know, I believe it was Rita or Brenda was mentioning earlier that, you know, just thanking the province, I guess, for any kind of grants that we can receive. You know, we are a small community, and grant funding, especially in smaller communities, these projects would not be possible. Moving forward in 2022, we actually have additional plans come up for additional sidewalks. We have a world-class mountain bike facility that we hope to, our long-term goal is to connect that to some of the walking trails in our community and ultimately to the downtown core and the lakefront. So we're quite excited about that. In addition to that, in 2022, we are going to update our active transportation plan. So it's all very exciting. And again, it's all very new for us as well. You know, over the last couple of years, sidewalks just weren't a thing that we even considered, again, because funding is such a hard thing to come by. So, you know, we're actually really excited about it now. We do have a planner on board that we're moving in the right direction. And again, just working together with Lake Babine Nation. Bernard's phenomenal to work with. We both come up with some ideas. Some of them make sense, some of them don't. But just moving forward, I think it's a great relationship that we've built on. And again, just moving forward, we're going to continue that. Well, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dale and Patrick, and or Bernard. This is the problem, and it's kind of funny that both of you have 2 first names. I know I struggle with that when I meet people that have two first names. Okay, so we've got a question here from where is it? From Pamela, who. It's a 2-part question. She says, so is it really the relationship that's key is one part? And then she asks about the full service agreement written, you know, whether that was written into the OCP or whether it was something that the band and municipal staff drew up. So I'm not sure who wants to answer that first. We'll let you both have a go at the relationship piece, but over to you.
You can speak on behalf of the full service agreement if you like.
Yeah. So the MTSA agreement, it's a process that was created by Indigenous Services Canada, and it's a process that they found that would be a way for the First Nation to be working with the municipality on how the services can be provided. The water, the sewer, the garbage collection, the road maintenance. So this process has been, I believe it was developed back in the early 90s, maybe a little bit earlier than that. So that it's something that the Indigenous Services Canada came up with, and we've just been utilizing that ever since to have this working agreement with the Village of Burns Lake.
And in regards to if the relationship is key, as Bernard mentioned, the Lake Babine Nation and Burns Lake Band are within the Village Burns Lake boundaries, if you will. So, that is part of the reason, or that is the reason that we do have a full service agreement with Lake Babine Nation and Burns Lake Band. But, again, it's, as Bernard mentioned earlier, it's our community. So, just working together on anything that comes up in our community, it's key. So it's just, it's almost a no-brainer just to reach out to, both First Nations and work together on anything that arises. Even through COVID over the last couple of years, like Babine, Burns Lake Band, Village Burns Lake, we all work together on that to make our community a safer place to live. So, it is key, I believe, to have a good, solid working relationship and a friendship with Lake Babine and Burns Lake Bands.
Yeah, I think you just nailed it right there. And I'll just say that our whole province is on Indigenous land, and so many communities have adjacent First Nation governments who are, and so it just makes so much sense to have a healthy, respectful, productive relationship. And so that's so nice to see you guys role modeling that up in the north, and lovely. So there is a question here from Sean, who asks, heard you have an existing active transportation plan and are going to update in 2022. Is there eligible funding for an update?
Thanks, Rita. Yeah, so we actually applied for the grant in 2021, and we were successful in receiving that grant to upgrade our active transportation plan, which is, and then so essentially we just turned that over to the planner that is now on board with the Village of Burns Lake. And Amy has taken that a step further, and now we're just moving forward with that. There's other infrastructure possibilities in the Village of Burns Lake. We're looking at, for example, it's called the Village Heights. It's a subdivision on top of the hill, which we're going to incorporate in, again, walking trails, sidewalks, etc. So, again, getting back to the fact that we are a small community, we don't have a lot of funding for sidewalks, and I believe actually the grant we received in 2020 for their first phase of the sidewalk kickstarted what's coming down the pipe over the next 2 to 3 years. So, again, we're going to be doing another phase in 2022, and then moving forward with the updated plan. We're going to start incorporating more walking trails, etc. So yeah, it's quite exciting, and again, I can't say enough that without grant funding, it wouldn't be possible in a small community like this. We have a very small industrial tax base, so it's basically it's tough. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that is a challenge with so many small communities, is just not having that same budget or even the staff in terms of supporting that. So yeah, that's something that we found across the board in our study on this. And but I think that message is getting across. So thank you. Just want to open it up and see if there are any other questions. Go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hand. Okay, well, not seeing any other questions. I'll just thank you so much, Dale and Bernard. Thanks for sharing your story with us, and thanks for the great work that you're doing.
Thank you, Rita.
up in Lake Babine Nation and Burns Lake. Really appreciate you being with us today. So now what we're going to do is we are going to break out into breakout rooms and share. We want to hear from the rest of the participants, but what your experience and what your wisdom is in this area. And so we are very pleased to have a number of facilitators who are going to divide into the rooms with us. So we're very pleased to have Marilyn Chang with the Union of BC Municipalities, Sean O'Flaherty from the Village of Chase, as well as Sebastian Arcand with the City of Nelson. As well as Kerry and I are gonna help out. So, but please join. You'll automatically get put into a room. Be patient. It does take there is a little lag for a moment. So you'll have 20 minutes for a discussion, and then we're going to convene back, and we'll wrap up our session with a little report back and with a presentation from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. So we'll talk to you in the breakout room. Thank you. Just hold on. Be patient.
Okay, I just wanted to jump in here, just to let everybody know that the breakout rooms were set up last night, and so they might be not totally balanced. It's because it's just going to happen, and we might have to go in and shift a few people around if everybody ends up in the same breakout room. So I just wanted to give you that heads up, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Excellent. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope that you all had an interesting discussion, as I know we certainly did in our group. And so let's hear some of the highlights. Let's start with you, Sean. Can you tell us what were some of the highlights of your group's discussion?
Yeah, sure. I'll just go through. I just took some notes. So Kate from MOTI said that schools can act as a hub, for generating interest in active transportation. You get the kids sort of excited about it, their parents. You do some bike safety. There's a Safe Routes to School program out there. There's funding available for that. And she was talking about a specific Gulf Island. So that was good to hear. And then Jesse was commenting that there sometimes is a resistance in a community, for some of these, frivolous, there's naysayers out there, not everybody's like, this is a comfortable group. We all want active transportation, but there's there's opposition out there, and parking, Jesse says, is you don't want to take away people's parking. It seems to be very contentious, and I would agree with that. And he also said to focus on key areas like schools as well, so similar to Kate. And then we had Steven's joining us from Alberta today.
Sean, I got Jesse Skolmoski here. I was hearing my first name, but obviously you got another Jesse in your group.
Oh yeah, there might have been. I didn't get Jesse's last name.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't in the group, and I didn't want to be affiliated with everything that was being assigned to somebody else.
Okay, right, fair enough. And so Stephen from Alberta said that the experiences in Alberta and BC can vary, and he said that BC generally has better attitudes towards active transportation. He says that farmers can struggle with being convinced that bike lanes are a priority. And so another valid comment. And then he also says that shovel-ready projects are essential. You got to be ready to go. That grant funding comes out and you got to strike. It's if you don't have that, you're less likely, you're not likely to get the funding. Kate said that relationship, like inter-community relationship, the leaders, the various agencies, build those relationships earlier, build them early, build them strong, get that momentum, and then when the active, when you have a plan that needs to be implemented, you've got those people somewhat in place. And Yeah, and then you talked a little bit about having an active transportation plan and how important that is, when you go through that process. But one of the sort of the collateral positive impacts of going through that process is that you're pulling out those champions and those leaders in the community, because those are the people that are going to drive that plan and implement it over time. And then I used an example that we had in Chase where, about leveraging. You talk about return on investment. What's your best bang for your buck? How do you maximize your return? Well, partners, sponsors, leveraging your money, grant funding, of course. But in 2020, we partnered with the Shuswap Trail Alliance, which is a trail builder in the Okanagan and the Shuswap area. We contributed $4,000. It turned into $58,000 by the time it was all said and done, as it kept getting leveraged again and again and again. And that goes back into trail planning and trail building. So leveraging is a great way to return investment. And then we talked a little bit about do's and don'ts. What are some things that can garner support for your program, and things that can hinder support. And one thing that we talked about was, if you've got an active transportation plan, you don't have enough to build something that connects, and you put in a 50-meter chunk of sidewalk or a 200-meter multi-use pathway. It doesn't connect anywhere. It leaves you stranded. People will be frustrated. Your council won't be supportive. The partners will walk away. And you'll just put a sour taste on your overall goals in achieving active transportation in your community. So,
well, lots of. Sorry, what was that?
Oh, that's it from our group.
Oh, that's
Kate,
great.
Kate had a question. She wanted to know. There was one question from Kate at the end there. She wanted to know from the other participants if there was any COVID infrastructure that was placed, in terms of widening sidewalks or allowing more space and that sort of thing. But I'll just throw that back out there. I don't have the answer.
Okay, why don't we see if we can get that chat going in the chat box. I want to welcome in now Sebastian to report on what were some of the highlights that you spoke about in your that came out of your breakout room.
Yeah, sure. I think, we had a few conversations that kind of went around how do you make this kind of a positive for different user groups. I know we had some specific questions, mostly like how do we share this, and what's acceptable to to share pedestrian cycling, and even potentially with ATV users. So if there was any best practice around that, we had that conversation. Also, really another tip that was shared was everyone's got access to Strava data, and Strava has come out with, I think it's called Strava Metro, something like that, and you can go and kind of view some travel behaviors and desire lines through their heat map and through different functions they have. So just Google Strava Metro, and it's not necessarily it's a tool in the toolbox, right? So it gives, I find it useful. It gives you an indicator in your planning process. And as that becomes more popular and we get more users, you get, better data. I know in larger cities it is often used to do transportation planning. Research is important, data gathering. Think about pilot projects. If you're unsure of, what to do, you can think about, kind of low barrier pilot projects to kind of test out the waters. Again, in terms of sharing, also think about equity. All users are all users have different needs. So in your planning, try to make sure that you cater to a lot of the user groups. Often that requires you to put a lot of different lenses, and it's probably best to reach out and communicate with all the different user groups. And I know in Nelson we've had some success in better understanding, how people, what types of things people need to make it functional for them. And we've also had some lessons learned where it's benefited one user group, but it actually caused more complication for another user group. So again, learn as you go, make it better the next time around. Yeah, I think that kind of summarizes it. Oh yeah, maybe one last point, how to address missing links. And missing links can be, how do you go through private land? How do you go through MOTI infrastructure? How do you go through CP railway? I think, some of the comments around that is, start the conversations early, try and find alignments or co-benefits for all user groups, and for especially if you're going through private lands, like what's the benefit in allowing those different entities to for you to use that missing link. So I think, yeah, it's really about conversations and finding alignments and co-benefits, because I think a lot of people struggle with this, whether it be private MOT land or CP land. There's always some missing links that aren't so easy to get through. So I think that's probably a common theme.
Absolutely. Getting through those barriers, literally and figuratively, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Sebastian. Next up, I'm going to call on Sue McCortoff, and I have to apologize to Group 5 because we do not know how you ended up as a group on your own, but I understand that that you had a good discussion and that Sue is going to provide some highlights for us.
Yes, thank you. Because nobody sort of showed up to lead, we just decided to all take turns telling about our own situations, which was great. So I'm the mayor of Vesuvius, and also on the in our group, we're regional district people, consulting groups, planners, town staff. So we all sort of had a different point of view, and we shared that, which I think is the main reason that we need to come together and talk about these things, because they're so everybody has a different little way of dealing with things. And when you hear about other people's ideas, it helps to trigger things in making yours better. So I started off by saying that we are a town on Highway 3 and Highway 97, and we're a main thoroughfare because Highway 1 and Highway 5 are not operational. So we have that to deal with, as well as doing an OCP review, which we've just finished, and dealing with MOTI. And I also have to deal with all of the people, the residents in the town of Vesuvius, because what MOTI thinks we should do through the middle of town sometimes is different from what our residents think. So I've been told all kinds of things, like maybe that I should resign and get somebody else in there, but I don't normally pay attention to that, because that happens to me if you do something that isn't quite on their agenda. One of the things that we didn't mention in our group, and I'm going to throw it in there right now, is not only bikes and e-bikes on the transportation route, but also scooters, because we have a lot of retired people in our town, and they drive scooters anywhere they want to, and also golf carts. And I know the village of Chase has incorporated golf carts. I think it's because they're off the highway and not smack in the middle of the highway. So that is a problem with, of course, but you know what? Golf carts are a way of transportation. So we just had a good conversation with all of us, and I'm sorry we didn't really get to answering the questions. Thanks.
Well, it sounds like you had a good exchange of ideas and a good discussion, and that was the whole objective. And certainly can appreciate that you can't please all the people all of the time. And maybe if you are, it means that you're not doing anything. So You know, we have to do what we can to bring people along and to build support, absolutely, and to create more champions. But there are always going to be the naysayers, and that just, you know, I think it's just an inevitability. Okay, so next up, let's call on Marilyn. Why don't you give us a few highlights from your group, Marilyn?
Yeah, so some of the discussion in our group was around normalizing biking in the community. So having public events like the Bike to Work Week, put on by advocacy organizations, those are great events to set the culture and the norm of biking to work or biking to school or biking to do your errands or whatever it is you want to do in the community. So that was one of the pieces of our conversation. The other was around safety in small towns. So funding often went to making biking safer in communities and not necessarily making infrastructure, not necessarily in building infrastructure, though we do know that separated infrastructure does work in both large and small communities to encourage folks to get out on their bikes. Another key piece of our conversation was around committees and bringing stakeholders together, and an example was shared around Vancouver Coastal Health bringing stakeholders together with Mtsa on an active travel program for kids. And that was good with sharing and building our relationships. And there, other than the stakeholder groups that are run by health authorities, there's sometimes bicycle advisory committees within the local government that also bring the stakeholders to the table. The last piece I'll share was around snow removal. So that's definitely an issue for some of our communities, many of our communities in BC. And so the community in Beaumont, Alberta, the local government doesn't do sidewalk snow removal. So residents are left to do that themselves. So there's a big discussion there around how do we promote timely snow removal, and the best solution explored in that community to date is the use of volunteer snow angels. But that is definitely one of the pieces for the communities that have a lot of snow in the winter.
Oh, I love that. The snow angels. That's so sweet. Okay, so Kerry, we're starting to run out of time here. So if you could give us your speed highlights, that would be great.
I'm so bad at that, Rita. We had some interesting conversations. They were a bit all over the map, but Jim from Whistler got cut off on when we were just getting into talking about e-bikes, which was getting really interesting. And I invite you to put your comments into the chat so that we can all be part of what you were going to say. So e-bikes we were just talking about it at the end, but you know, there were some concerns about the speed of e-bikes and shared trails, pedestrians and people traveling at higher speeds on e-bikes on trails that are too narrow to accommodate people in both directions. So some education about trail uses may be needed, and also the design of trails to ensure that they can accommodate the e-bikes as well. Also seeing them as a great opportunity too. So there were some concerns, but also, you know, excited about the e-bike use. And a couple of people talked about counts and how important they are for laying out the rationale for more sidewalks, or for that sometimes they're required on a grant application. So getting more into that, which I thought was really interesting, because on our survey, we really didn't hear that people were doing counts. So recommendation from Burns Lake to get going with that, and from I think Invermere talking about doing trail counters and how they can do prioritization of projects for trails that are really well used. And Burns Lake too, talking about concentrating places that people want to go, like a splash park and a dog park, you know, in places that are walkable. So thinking about how do people get from these great places on foot and using active transportation. So connecting the great places that in these small towns that way. And And one other discussion that was important, I think, was about electoral areas and how they, weren't really part of our research, and we're not, but they are an important part of the conversation. So lying outside of a municipality and being at the mercy of MOTI to make changes for active transportation is a really important part of the discussion. And certainly that's important in the Gulf Islands and Saltaire electoral area. So a lot more thought to electoral areas would be great, and regional districts goes along with that too. I hope I captured it. We really did have a great discussion in our group.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's what matters, is having that discussion. So for our group, I just want to highlight, do a few quick highlights. So in Yellow Point, they painted up a volunteer, Pamela, and painted up some yellow bikes and left them around a small route. And that generated a lot of buzz and excitement in the Facebook groups and the local media. And that eventually led to a proposal to create an active transportation route. And they've got almost $400,000 from the gas tax fund. And so that was an interesting way to spark the discussion and get the community interested and really to lay the groundwork. In the Columbia Shoe Swap area, they've got a separated bike path that goes around Silver Creek. That's quite impressive. And they got a big win by getting MOTI at the table early to talk about some leeway on the clearance zones and working around the BC hydro poles. And we're able to persuade the ministry to have a little flexibility with some of the standards, with the variants, by basically saying, well, people can be on the road, which is less safe, or they can be close to the road, which is, more safe. In Penticton, there's a great separated bike path and delayed intersection with lights, and we heard that the health authorities are there to support community groups. And so just to remember that the health authorities are a partner that really want to support communities work in this area. And then we also heard the importance of having data. And also about how advisory bike lanes are a really interesting solution for small communities where you're constricted by the road width, and can really put in an advisory bike lane with some paint and some signage and some public education. And certainly we saw that's in one of our case studies with Gibson's. So I think that wraps up our discussion part of the agenda. So thanks everyone for participating and your contributions. Next up, I'm very delighted to invite our friends from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, Jesse Skomolski and Kate Bernias. So Jesse is the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Active Transportation Grants, where he works to enhance mobility options for all ages and abilities. He's also responsible for the BC Active Transportation Design Guide, a resource seen to be a global first and anticipated to have a lasting positive impact on planning, design, and infrastructure. And if any of you guys have seen that, it's like an old phone book. It's huge. And it's quite amazing. Kate Bernias is and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Kate, is the project lead for climate and active transportation at the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. She's responsible for implementing the active transportation strategy, Move, Commute, Connect, and meeting Clean BC targets. After receiving her master's in public administration at UVic, she worked in local and regional government and in consulting. She is committed to helping communities achieve economic, social, and environmental sustainability through transportation. Okay, over to Jesse and Kate now for your presentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. And we're pleased to speak to you from Victoria, which is the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking people. As Jesse gets the presentation set up there, the Lekwungen speaking people, who are today known as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nation, and we have the privilege of working and living in that area. And then Jesse, are you having trouble there?
No, everything's going perfectly. I'm getting closer.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe a bit of trouble. Let's see.
It looked to me, Jesse, like you had it, you just needed to change your view. Up at the top of the thing. Just put it up, and then you at the top of the screen it says view, and then you do slideshow view, right?
I'll keep talking as you work that out, Jesse.
Yeah.
So okay, so we're speaking to you from the Ministry of Infrastructure, Transportation and Infrastructure, and our group is responsible for the active transportation strategy and the active transportation grant program, as well as implementing the Clean BC goals, and most recently the Clean BC roadmap that was released just last month, with new and more ambitious goals around reducing GHG emissions, particularly, or where it specifically notes the role of transportation in meeting those goals. And I'll pass it over to Jesse.
So how does the slideshow look for everybody? Is it working now?
Yeah, it looks good.
Nice. Okay. I'd like to let you know that I am also speaking to you today from the West Saanich and the Lekwungen peoples, and I'm proud to be able to do that from their traditional lands. So in this presentation, we're going to talk a bit about Move, Commute, Connect, British Columbia's active transportation strategy, talk about how what we're doing for AT as a result of that. We're going to dig deeper into infrastructure, education and encouragement programs, and policy and planning. So Kate and I will be doing a bit of back and forth to keep things interesting for you as you listen. We hope to not be too long because we recognize there's probably many interesting questions to come our way. So Move, Commute, Connect was released in June 2019 by the now retired Minister Trevena. And we also, at that time, we released the Active Transportation Design Guide, the What We Heard report, as well as other companion documents, or those were the companion documents. Now, my cursor here is highlighting that Rita was a participant at the event and was one of our advocates and supporters during our consultation. And so we are grateful for her role for active transportation with the ministry. Move, Commute, Connect. We have the goal of doubling the percentage of trips taken by active transportation by 2030. So this was the big thing that the province did, is they identified that they really want to double the amount of people that are choosing active transportation. And there's many ways that we can go about that through infrastructure, through programming, and through policy changes, as well as legislation changes. We also integrated Vision Zero into Move, Commute, Connect, which is really the province and other nations identifying that they want to have zero fatalities or serious injuries resulting from collisions and or crashes on the road. Move, Commute, Connect was released as part of supporting Clean BC and the 2030 GHG reduction targets. And most recently, the roadmap that has come out in which we are going to reduce the amount of vehicle kilometers travel in addition to the GHGs. So one of the best ways to do that we see is making people move under their own steam using active transportation, possibly the cleanest mode of transportation. Now, this group I'm sure knows all the benefits of active transportation, but we as a ministry, we also recognize that there's significant co-benefits. Not only are we reducing congestion and GHG reductions, but also it creates a more connected, integrated, healthier community and environment. And it makes British Columbia, you know, a province or a destination of choice. It creates opportunities. There's innovation, and it's something where we recognize it's for all British Columbians and all BC communities. So you're going to learn more about how much we see the importance of understanding the 18 needs of everybody and trying to find solutions that work for, you know, all of the different groups that make up active transportation users and residents or visitors to British Columbia. I'll hand it over to Kate to talk more about some of the data we've started to collect.
So when the active transportation strategy was released in 2019, we only had limited data about how people in BC were traveling by active transportation. And so in late 2019, we conducted a random sample population survey of British Columbians to find out how they were using active transportation to get to work, school, and community destinations. Next slide, please. And so from that survey, we found that across BC, about a third of school children are primarily using active transportation, walking, cycling, rolling to get to and from school. About 10% of the population is using active transportation to get to work, and 8 or 9% to get to school or community activities. So that we saw across the province varied a bit, but that it's not just a Lower Mainland thing, that there's already people using active transportation to get to work and shopping in regions across BC. And there's also an interest in using more active transportation. Next slide, please. So not only did we want to know how people primarily use active transportation, but also if people are using active transportation in the summer or once in a while, we asked questions to find out if and put people into user groups. So non-AT users, occasional AT users, and frequent active transportation users. And it's those occasional active transportation users where we see a lot of potential to increase the convenience and safety and use of AT to get to local destinations. Next slide. But we also asked about what barriers there were to active transportation use. And this was an open-ended question. And so the 4 key answers we received related to weather, age and disability, transporting children, and distance to destination. When you look at the overall research around active transportation use, the first barrier that is identified in the research is around safety and infrastructure. And I think that still is reflected in these barriers, that weather can be, that the walking or cycling experience in rain or snow can be improved through improved infrastructure, as well as the infrastructure that's built that is welcome to people of all ages and abilities, different types of bikes and different abilities there. Next slide, please. We also asked about motivation, and that's where people spoke to both the infrastructure and more infrastructure being built throughout the province, the opportunity for health and fitness as part of your travel, and then also the positive impact on the environment, less vehicle emissions and the air quality that makes our communities more livable and nicer to be in. Next slide, please. And I'll pass it to you, Jesse. Thanks.
Great. So now we're going to talk about some infrastructure elements of active transportation, starting with the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program. We'll talk about Vision Zero grants, and we're going to talk about provincial roads in your communities. So we, throughout this morning, we've heard some references to provincial grants, and one of them that's available is the Active Transportation Grant Program. I've been administering this program since the 2017 intake, but it used to be Bike BC. So one of the things we've done is we've shifted from Bike BC to this new grant program as part of Move Commute Connect. And the main shift was to make it inclusive of all modes of active transportation. It actually vastly increased what was eligible for communities to apply for their projects, which gave them an opportunity to do things such as amenities or things that you normally wouldn't have seen through the Bike BC program. It's eligible for all communities within BC, Indigenous, local governments, regional districts, Islands Trust. And so, but the program, as it's shifted from Bike BC, it has also created more of a focus on Indigenous, small, and rural communities. You'll see if you take a look at the amount of projects that were funded traditionally through Bike BC to now with the AT grant program, there's been a pretty drastic shift where we've dispersed the funds more evenly across the province and found ways to work with smaller Indigenous and rural communities. So the program incorporates things like the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, a gender-based analysis plus lens. We designed the program to support clean BC and healthy communities, and of course, tourism and economic development. The two aspects of the program are the network plan and the infrastructure grants. With the network plan, this is eligible for communities with a population under 25,000. So what we sort of see as our medium to smaller community category. And we've been offering $50,000 for them to create what we see as an active transportation network plan. This is there to support the community consultation and the engagement, any sort of engineering design work that helps them identify some of the key priorities and get themselves much closer to what would be considered a shovel-ready project that meets the needs of the community. Which is also one of the criteria for being eligible for an active transportation infrastructure grants. So now the infrastructure grant, we shifted from Bike BC to AT to have a maximum grant of 500,000, where it used to be 1 million. This is one of the reasons we were able to disperse the funds further across the province. Through budget 21, the provincial government communicated that it was committing $36 million to active transportation over the next 3 years. So with those amounts of funds, we wanted to be able to find a way to support as many diverse projects in as many communities across BC. I want to highlight this sliding scale. Today we heard from Burns Lake and Lake Babine and the First Nation. The Indigenous community or Indigenous partnerships receive the highest cost share amount of 80%. And that Lake Babine and the Babine First Nation was an example, Burns Lake and Lake Babine First Nation, pardon me, was an example of a partnership. And so this was a shift that was made in order to create these sort of reconciliation opportunities or chances for the communities to build closer alliances and to partner on what would be best for their community needs. So we encourage you to explore those opportunities where they exist. We also, what we do is communities under 15,000, we offer a 70% cost share. And then the larger communities, it's 50-50 because they have a greater tax base. So many things are now eligible: multi-use paths, pedestrian infrastructure, amenities, safety enhancements, but there is that shovel-ready requirement. And that's because it's very important that the community has done the legwork and knows what their community needs are and is ready to go to tender and build it. And the province is there to help that type of infrastructure. And that's why we fund the network planning grant to help you get there. So I have some examples here from Vanderhoof, Tofino with their new multi-use path, and Kelowna with this kind of complete intersection approach. And also I'd like to highlight that most recently with our grant announcements, 68% of this year's projects were from Indigenous and communities with a population under 15,000. Over to you, Kate.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, I think we're going to try and get through the rest of the presentation in about 4 minutes. So if there's anything after this, we're happy to speak separately and answer questions. And yeah. So Vision Zero grants, this is a grant program that's open right now. and the intake closes on December 10th. It's a partnership between Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and run through the health authorities. I encourage you all to have a look at that grant program for very small scale grants that align with the Vision Zero principles. And then next, in terms of our provincial roads in your community, there's been a lot of discussion in today's workshop about that. And I encourage everyone to make friends with your local operations manager and the regional offices of the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. We're also working from headquarters with the Active Transportation Design Guide and a more provincial approach to information sharing and coffee and cookies, as Stephen says, to support active transportation being installed with new projects when there's stimulus money, and those kind of opportunities were part of those discussions to encourage active transportation infrastructure to be built on our provincial rights of way. Next slide, please. Education and encouragement. One of the big roles of the active transportation strategy is to support education and encouragement that's built on top of the infrastructure that your communities are building. And so we support Go by Bike Week. And that is, I encourage you, if you don't have a Go by Bike event, we're working with Go by Bike Society to provide more funding to smaller communities to support both those events in the spring, fall, and winter bike to work day, as well as more programming with that. We partner with the Energy and Mines, Ministry of Energy and Mines for the Scrap It e-bike program, as well as, actually, skip to that, and the Specialty Used Vehicle Incentive Program. So if you have businesses in your community where an e-bike a cargo e-bike could be useful, there's rebates available for them up to $1,700 to buy up to 5 bikes. As well, PST was removed from e-bikes in last year's budget. The intake for the second year of the Active School Travel pilot program is right now open. It closes December 2nd. And this program also focuses on small and rural communities to plan and support programming to increase walking and cycling to school. Next slide. And then we have partnered with Hub Cycling to provide bike education for grade 4 and 5 students. So this is an hour and a half of both in-class and on bike training. And though right now it's being mostly done in larger communities, they're providing satellite courses to smaller communities, the Sunshine Coast, Cowichan, as well as Squamish this fall, and there'll be more communities in the spring through this program. Next slide. And then I'll pass it back to Jesse for like 1 minute for all of these items.
Yeah, so our next section on policy and planning, this is where we talk about the design guide and MVA pilot project, planning grants, and the cycling and pedestrian study. So the design guide was released at the same time as Move, Commute, Connect, 576 pages to help engineers, planners, and community movers, shakers, leaders to help figure out what might work best for their communities. Lots to consider in there. We've had some good feedback, which has been great. We included some content that was specific to small and rural communities. That's section C. And we've led training sessions across the province. A big part of this was to ensure that equity was part of the design guide. And it's all about all ages and abilities, universal design, and gender-based analysis plus, so that everyone can use active transportation in a safe, consistent, reliable way. We've also, as part of Move, Commute, Connect, there was a commitment for Motor Vehicle Act pilot projects. We've got 8 communities that have signed up to try out micro-mobility electric kick scooters. And the pilot project is coming up to the start of year 2 for some communities. And this is a chance for us to evaluate their effectiveness or not. Over to you, Kate.
Thanks. So the UBCM planning grant was available for populations of communities under 25,000. So that those grants provided opportunities to incorporate active transportation into official community plans. There were 2 intakes, and we don't have another intake planned at this time, but if so, it'll be communicated through UBCM. Next slide. And then we're working with the Ministry of Health to undertake a cycling and pedestrian safety policy. That need for data is so important, especially around safety data. And so we hope by doing this study, especially looking at the last 5 years, we'll be able to see trends and be able to communicate that back to communities across the province. Next slide. And we're done. So we'll pass it back to Rita to close it up. But thank you so much for having us and sharing information today. And we're available to answer questions individually in the future as well. Thank you.
Wow, just by the skin of our teeth, hey? Excellent. Well, great timing. And I really apologize, everyone. We had this all timed out, but you know, these things sometimes get a little bit wonky even when you build in that buffer zone. So what we're going to do, because I understand there are lots of questions for Jesse and Kate, please type your questions in the chat right now, and we will do a follow-up email. There's a number of questions about how do you make do if your local MOTI rep isn't super supportive of active transportation, and some other things. So if anyone else has some more follow-up questions, please get those in now, and we will copy those out and make sure that we do a little follow-up. So I just want to thank all of our presenters. Thank you, Jesse, Kate, Kerry, Stacy, Bernard, Dale, Marilyn, Sean, Sebastian, and thanks to all of our participants. Before we sign off, I'd like to let you know that that we've got a report on the survey and a report on the literature review is currently on the BCAHL website right now. However, we are creating a whole platform that will include all of the case studies, some video case studies, and a bunch of other supporting documents. That will be on a new website called bigstepssmalltownsbc.ca. So we'll follow up with that will come out in our e-newsletter. And I just really want to thank again all of our community champions in Lake Babine Nation, in Burns Lake, in Gibsons, in Powell River, in Rossland, and in Nelson, and in Duncan. Thanks so much for opening up your communities and sharing with us. And to thank one more time our funders, the Real Estate Foundation of BC, Pacific Blue Cross, CN Stronger Communities, and the Heart and Stroke Foundation. It's really great to have that support to do this important work. And just want to wish everyone a wonderful day, and make sure that you be careful out there with the rains coming in, and but you know, if there's a break, or go out anyways and explore your community on foot or by bike or by wheelchair. Thanks everyone, and have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining.
Thanks very much, Rita.
Thank you, Dale.